I went on a road trip in my Tesla Model 3 with a blank screen. I'm Frugal Tesla Guy, and I'm going to show you how I did it. The center touchscreen in all Teslas is the hub for most data and functions when it comes to driving the car. So it begs the question, will it drive without the screen? Well, simply put, the answer is yes. The screen is essentially a monitor for the main computer and still runs in the background, allowing the car to operate. With that said, you won't know how fast you're going, at least in the 3 and Y, and you won't be able to perform a lot of functions that require the touch screen. However, with the help of the Tesla app, voice commands, plus a few other smartphone apps, it can be done. If you follow my channel, then you know I recently had issues with my screen, forcing me to purchase a new one, which, for the record, wasn't cheap. I'll post a link to those videos in the description below if you want more details. Now, unfortunately, the timing could not have been worse, because we were planning a 725-mile trip to Mexico, and the service center couldn't fit me in until 2 days after we were scheduled to come back home. So, do we take the Chevy Volt or the Tesla without a touchscreen? Well, I think you know the answer to that. So I started to plot my plan of attack and quite honestly was overthinking it. At first, I wanted to have 3 standalone devices for the trip. One for maps, the second for a speedometer, and the third for quick access to basic functions through the Tesla app, in particular climate control. So I pulled out the iPad with the LTE service to use for maps, my old iPhone 6 as a speedometer, and my current iPhone for the Tesla app functions. But I quickly began to discover this plan wasn't going to work. Well, number one, the iPad is older than I thought and only has 3G service and was completely useless if mapping needed to reroute. Secondly, the speedometer app needed the latest version of iOS, and the iPhone 6 was too old to support that. So basically, that left me with my iPhone 13 Pro Max, which I quickly discovered was all I needed. Now, I was able to mount my phone just above the screen and kept it on maps most of the time. I used the speedometer app only when I got onto the highway to get to my desired speed. And once I activated traffic-aware cruise control, I went back to maps. Now, I rarely used the Tesla app because I was able to use voice commands to control the temperature inside the car. Now, I mainly use the Tesla app to confirm my speed and check the battery. Now, even though the Tesla app does display your speed, I didn't use it as a speedometer because there's a delay which made it difficult to get to the speed I needed. However, once I knew my speed, I used the right scroll wheel to adjust my speed in 5-mile-per-hour increments. As always, knew how fast I was going as a result. Now, my Apple Watch came in handy too because I was able to open up Watch for Tesla to check the status of the battery and even my speed, and never really needed my phone for that. Now, you might be asking about preconditioning the battery. Well, as you may or may not know, in order to initially get the maximum charging speed, the car preconditions the battery based on the GPS coordinates in the native Tesla navigation app. Now, since I couldn't enter it from the touch screen, I used the share feature on my phone. Now, once I entered the address of my next supercharger, I shared it to the car so it knew to precondition the battery. Now, on a side note, I also could still hear the turn-by-turn directions. Now, speaking of superchargers, I obviously used the app to monitor how fast it was charging and the level it was charged to. Now, since I didn't have the native Tesla maps to search for chargers within my range, I used an app called Supercharged. Now, it shows where all of the Tesla superchargers are and even color-coded V2 and V3 superchargers. The only thing it doesn't do is tell me how many stalls are being used, which can be very handy, especially in largely populated areas like LA and San Diego. Now, I would also like to briefly touch on what many of you might be asking about, and that is a mapping program called A Better Route Planner. Now, up until this point, my only experience with it had really only been planning trips, but not actually using it while driving. I just couldn't validate really using any other navigation software other than the Tesla navigation system, which, in my opinion, It's just more user-friendly and it works best with the car. However, now was my opportunity to try out a better route planner as my navigation source. I even signed up for the free 7-day trial of their premium service. After a few hours, I found myself actually going back to Apple Maps. Now, I hate saying anything negative about a better route planner because it does get rave reviews from most people. However, I found the app on the phone to be quite cumbersome. It's very clunky and isn't very intuitive based on my experience with it. The premium service does give you the live status of the chargers, but I found it difficult trying to figure out how to get the live status, especially while driving. Once again, adding to my argument that the app isn't very intuitive, at least in my opinion. So in the end, I stopped trying to use it after my third supercharging stop and stuck with Apple Maps and the supercharged app. Now, I was able to use autopilot along with FSD Beta, but since I couldn't see the car nagging at me to put pressure on the wheel, I didn't want to risk getting kicked out of the FSD Beta program, so I just stuck with traffic-aware cruise control. Now, overall, it was a successful trip. Now, the biggest scare I had was once I was in Mexico, I found myself in an area without cell phone service, and voice commands don't work if the car is offline. Now, our passports were in the glove box, along with all of my cash. No bueno. Now, the good news is, once the car connected to Wi-Fi in the garage from our last trip, we were back in business. Now, going on a road trip without your screen can be done, but is it a good idea? Of course not. Although you can use voice commands for a lot of things, and as we just learned, they don't work if the car can't find a cell tower. Secondly, if something should go wrong, you have no idea of what it could be because you won't be able to see any of the warnings on the screen. Now, fortunately, that didn't happen to us, but it certainly was in the back of my mind. Now, I'm sure there are a lot more things I could cover in this topic, but bottom line, the car will drive without a screen and will get you by until you're able to get it repaired. But going on a road trip without a screen, probably not a good idea. Now, I try to stay on top of the comment section, so be sure to ask any questions about my experience without a screen. Also, as I mentioned earlier, I will be posting a video going through the reasons why my screen went blank and what it took, including price, to get it working again. Well, thank you all so much for watching, and you know the drill. Like, subscribe, and stay positively charged.